Sir Einstein, Walt Disney, Thomas Alva Edison. These were the eminent personalities who have suffered from SLDs. But by looking at these examples, we can conclude that SLD, it cannot hamper or it cannot stop a progress of a person towards achieving a higher goal in a career and in a life. So to make us more aware about these SLDs, I request Changing Foundation members to take over the today's webinar. Over to you, Parijita.
Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning to all. Me and my colleague are here representing Change Inc. This is founded by Miss Nupur Jhunjhunwala, and we together work towards inclusion of individuals with specific learning disabilities in the higher education vertical, school vertical, and at workplace, and also in the vertical of skilling. So today we are here to talk a little bit more about how can we work towards such individuals with SLD and their inclusion in the higher education sector. So beginning with just I'll have this quick as if you can put this on your chat. This is a picture that you're seeing. I would just ask everyone to tell me that who do they think over here um, might have any sort of SLD. Just like quickly put it in your chat. Thank you. So again, this gets us to a very important question that is it possible for us to look at somebody and tell that, thank you, ma'am, somebody just said that anyone can have that. It's very difficult to look at an individual and tell them if they have a specific learning disability, and therefore these are called invisible disability. It's very difficult to just look at someone and tell them that, okay, they have a specific kind of learning disability. So let's begin understanding neurodiversity. Specific learning disabilities include dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, autism, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder. So dyslexia is a particular SLD that in which generally people have trouble reading fluently or accurately. They may also have trouble reading, writing, spelling, and with comprehension. Then moving to dysgraphia, it particularly impacts the ability to write legible and with required speed. For some time, it may also impact the ability to put their thoughts in written form. Then we move to dyscalculia. It impacts math skills, including numbers, symbols, or use of functions needed. And then dyspraxia particularly impact movement and developmental coordination, including the ability to execute fine motor skills, like something as basic as tying your shoelaces. And when I'm talking about all of this and neurodiversity in general, what I'm actually trying to infer is that there's a difference in the way these people's brains function, process, and learn information. These individuals mostly have average or above average IQ. It's a lifelong condition that runs in families. More than often, it's not detected. Access to these accommodation and assistive technologies help individuals excel through their lifetimes. Again, as we saw in our previous slide, that it's an invisible disability and can only be diagnosed through psychometric testing. And understanding neurodiversity also will further lead us to understand that why unemployment and underemployment are the key challenges. And when I talk about a fact, I can look here that it won't be wrong to say that 1 in 5 individuals are thought to be affected by dyslexia, but more than often are not tested and they never realize it in their lifetime or much later in their lifetime. And now we want to understand that how do these specific learning disabilities manifest. So this is a very understanding. This is a pictorial representation of how dyslexia might look like for an individual. It impacts their understanding of language, and why so? Because this is how a written test might be perceived by a brain with dyslexia. And dyslexia accounts for almost 80% of SLDs. So if you look at this graphic, it's very difficult to read any word written over here because it's constantly moving. Letters are constantly mirroring. So, with so much of movement, it's very overwhelming for any individual with dyslexia to read something. Having said that, their understanding is not compromised by what they're not able to read out to people. Then moving to dyscalculia, it is present in about 5% of the population, which is like a huge number if we see. And it is actually something that impacts your skills, math skills, doing and understanding basic functions and formulas. Moving ahead, this is dysgraphia. It's diagnosed early in the childhood and affects a person's handwriting ability and fine motor skills, as you can see on the screen that it's very difficult for an individual with dysgraphia to be able to write in a legible manner. Moving ahead, we have a small video. Sorry, excuse me for that. I'll just play it.
Physics. I came and did physics, and
I think
again, the thing is that
we're
JEE
not
again is a
audible.
paper which does not judge you on your on your written skill. It's basically your logic and the maths. So there I've excelled. I was lucky enough to work for InfoEdge Group, which was a startup. And these places, I mean, the thing is, if you're good, it's pure meritocracy. So if you're good, you keep getting the opportunities.
So this is Mr. Vivek Khare, and from this video, what we could perceive is that he's always struggled with writing. He's struggled with writing a simple sentence. Having said, graduated from IIT and is an angel investor behind many of the leading brands. One of the most common that we would know today is that of Zomato. So, like we discussed earlier, that your ability to be able to write or read has not got much to do with your understanding and with your IQ, and more than often, these people have average or above IQ. Then again, this is a text. I would just want people to put it in the chat that if it's it's comprehensible for them in the very first look. Just like, you can write yes or no in your chat. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it is right to say that it's not legible at all what is written on the screen, but if I go to what actually is supposed to be meant by the text, this is what it is. So you will see there's a stark difference in, okay, somebody said that you can read it, but it might take you time. Even after reading it, it's very difficult to comprehend what is written. So when we move to what it is supposed to be, you will understand that it is very difficult to be able to write it or read what is written. It might take you more time. Having said that, it will not impact your understanding of what is being written or what is being read. Then another quick exercise, I would just ask you to unmute yourself. Anybody can volunteer. And I over here want you to read the color and not the word. Just quickly, if anybody could volunteer, unmute themselves.
Purple, grey, and red.
Yes, sir.
Black, orange, red.
It was yellow, blue, and black. You have to read the color and not the word.
Green, black, red, blue, yellow, orange, green, blue, red, purple, yellow.
So again, I asked a lot of you over here to read the color, and what our brains did is that we ended up reading the word that is written on the screen. So it was just a quick stimulation to understand that sometimes what we are reading and what we are perceiving are two different things. And if I push you to perceive and read something other than what is written, it becomes difficult. Either you take time or you're not able to do it. So this is how generally these learning disabilities manifest. And talking about it, these impact not just language but a lot of things beyond that. It impacts our executive functioning. It leads to poor self-esteem more than often because these individuals are subject to judgment because of their poor reading and writing capabilities, and that is often said that it is directly proportional to their IQ, and this sparks a lot of frustration in them. Then they have a memory challenge, can easily forget tasks and deadlines, especially when provided in multiple instruction format at once. There's a gap in oral and written performance. They're very good communicators, but they're more than often poor in writing. When it comes to them to perform in a written manner, it is something that is difficult. Their processing is slow, generally takes longer to process information, reading and writing, and that is mostly because they're sensitive to overstimulation. They struggle with concentrating due to movement, sound, light around them, and this leads to further difficulties in planning basic things like time management, which impacts their ability to plan the task at hand and manage the deadlines. So it's just not reading, writing, or being able to do small maths equations or being able to write legibly, but it manifests beyond that. Dyslexics are often very resilient. With the right support, they find ways to cope and succeed, just like all of us. If given the right support at the right time, we can cope and succeed and are often doing wonders. This is another video where we understand how actually coping, just like being by the right support, how can you cope better?
I was a cheater in class, and I'll tell you why. Because in math class, for example, the teacher would put up the sum on the table, and I would work it out in my head and have the answer ready with me. And when she would ask me, or he would ask me to show the working, I wouldn't have it, right? So they always assumed I copied it from my peer sitting next to me, and then the peer said, "No, I got the wrong answer." So this guy has figured it out in some way or form. So you went through that a few times because our brains just think differently, and we tend to understand what is being said before the other person is finished saying what they're saying. And that becomes very unnerving. I didn't know my ABCDs till the 5th grade, to be very honest. The only reason I could write my name was because there was another Kunal in my class. He wrote it, I memorized it, and I simply copied it. It was as simple as that. In the younger classes, I would sit at the back, so by the time the class finished reading the chapter twice, I had memorized it. So I would just pick up on where the person dropped off and recite from my memory. My sister started a computer class in the 8th grade, and I was in the 5th, and I got intrigued by the fact that she was typing something on this electronic device and it was doing something magical on the screen, and I picked up on that, and I started sort of spending my breaks in the lab, having the teachers and the assistants to teach me what they were doing. By the time I hit my 7th grade, I was actually doing 10th grade level programming and college school projects, and that's what became my go-to thing as an out for my lack of success in academia. And the school encouraged it, my friends encouraged it, and that's when I decided right on in my 8th grade to get a full-time job.
Again, this is a very beautiful example of how a child who was not able to do his ABCDs by the fifth standard is today leading a company with 500 employees. He's the founder and MD of AirPay Services. And what he's trying to say over here is that while he struggled with writing, but that did not compromise his understanding. In fact, he was much more quicker with understanding, and that is more than often very unnerving for a child. But as he proceeds to tell his story, he tells us that how like his interest was supported, how he was like he had the right kind of support mechanism around him, which further led to his success currently. So when we talk about this, we should not forget that we are trying to create the support environment ecosystem because dyslexia powers our life. And over here, this is a very great slide which we'll quickly do this stimulation exercise where we look around ourselves, we look at objects around us, and let's just see how many things which we use in our day-to-day life have actually been invented by people with dyslexia. So starting with something that we all of us have current around us is a bulb, right? So again, Thomas Alva Edison, from inventing a bulb to Alexander Graham Bell with creating the telephone technology, Henry Ford Motors, Wright brothers when we talk about their airplanes, Steve Jobs for the Apple products that most of us are using, Bill Hewitts for HP, and then obviously like Dr. Kamble mentioned in the very beginning, Albert Einstein. So, there are so many things that in our day-to-day life which have been invented and make things easy for us. It makes easier for us to live our lives by people with dyslexia. And what would it be if we don't sort of get the right support for these people? We'll be losing a lot of inventions for, the smooth living as a society together. So, a very interesting fact that 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. And here we are covering some of the very common brand names such as Ford Motors, Walt Disney, Tesla, IKEA, The Body Shop, CNN, IBM, Tommy Hilfiger, Charles Schwab's, JetBlue, so DreamWorks, Jamie Oliver Restaurant Group. So these are so many brands, and as we know that the amount, the percentage of these millionaires, the percentage, almost half of them are dyslexic. And how does the mind that can't process language manage to make such an impact? And that's a very valid question. That we are looking at people who are not able to read, who are not able to, write basic sentences, who are not able to learn their ABCDs till like later in their life. Then how are they creating these sort of impact? So, Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Group, he's an individual with dyslexia, and he says that I simply would where I am today, I wasn't dyslexic. In the real world, dyslexia can be a huge advantage. Many people with dyslexia have great imagination, creativity, and problem solving skills. So, this brings us to the dyslexic edge. Global studies have shown that the percentage of students with dyslexia in the fields such as engineering, art, and entrepreneurship are over twice the percentage of individuals with dyslexia in the general population. So that gets us to this fact that why are they creating and how are they able to create that sort of an impact by their inventions or by the services or the products that they're rendering to the society. It is A, because their visualization capabilities are par excellence. They're more than often innovators. They're very good with communication. Orally, they might not be very good with their written communication, but they communicate very well. The capabilities of understanding the bigger picture, reasoning it, connecting with people is so wonderful that they're more than often, they align towards problem solving in their environment. So this is a dyslexic edge. This is like a basic tendency with which individuals with dyslexia operate. What is India doing to tap into this critical resource pool of dyslexic thinkers? Again, we need to delve deeper into what, as a country, we have started to do in able to tap this critical resource that exists around us. The Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016 formally recognized SLDs as a disability in India for the first time in 2016, and it mandates 5% reservation for PWDs in government and government-aided institutions. When talking about a new education policy, this policy is in complete consonance with the version of the RPF Act 2016 and mandates that children with disability, inclusive of those with learning disabilities, will be enabled to fully practice in the regular schooling process from the foundational stage to higher education, ensuring equitable access to quality education, which is something that all of us are here talking about how further we can enable that. Universities and colleges will be required to set up high quality support centers to support SEDG students to transition to higher education. Again, making sure that while we're providing them the support needed in the foundational stage, it is also transitioned to the higher education. The new education policy under this steps to be taken by the government, it mandates and earmark suitable funds for the education of SEDGs, set clear targets for higher gross enrollment ratio for SEDGs, provide more financial assistance and scholarship in both public and private higher education institutes, and conduct outreach programs on higher education opportunities and scholarships among SEDGs, because we know that there are so many things that the government and we as a country are working towards, but it's also very important that our students understand that, and therefore it raises the importance and the need for outreach programs and develop and support technology tools for better participation and learning outcomes. So in today's time, technology and the tools, assisted tools that they are providing are the key in sort of getting better participation and the best learning outcomes in the class. Steps to be taken by all national higher education institute, more financial assistance and scholarship for these students, conduct outreach programs and provide scholarships, make admission process curriculum inclusive. This is a key point over here to understand that while we are talking about how we are sort of creating that environment, that ecosystem, but for our individuals, for students with SLDs to penetrate through this ecosystem, it is very important that the admission process, which is the first step towards this system, is inclusive in itself. And later we get to the need of making the curriculum more inclusive. And when we say making a more inclusive curriculum, nowhere are we talking about compromising the rigor of the curriculum. Then going ahead, ensuring all building and facilities are disabled friendly, develop bridge courses, provide counseling and support, ensure sensitization of faculty, counselor, and students, and strictly enforce all no discrimination and anti-harassment rules, and develop institutional development plans for action on increasing SEDS participation in these higher education institutes. Then talking about the directions of regulator, we'll talk about UGC list. They have asked for the need of a list for assisted transition from school to college and graduation to post graduation, recognition of SLD need and support in terms of reading, writing, spelling, speaking, and maths, provide assistance with oral and written material, pedagogical advancement where we talk about multisensory learning and assistive tech-based learning, and breaks during this when the learning is being imparted, then curriculum accommodation with subject assignment choices, exams, and evaluation. Moving to AICTE guidelines, AICTE's Professor P.P. Chakraborty Committee on Inclusion of Students with SLD in Higher Education has come up with a very expansive list of recommendations that talk about how the process needs to be implemented and these recommendations are still on their way of being accepted and implemented, and they're quite expansive from the very first stage of admission to the support in the system to curriculum and assistive technology and scholarship, so it covers all. Then there's circular mandate exam support and accommodation such as scribe and compensatory time. Then guidelines and directives for inclusion during online and distance learning as well, because we are moving to an ecosystem where we have had a lot of distance learning and online classes of late. Then not forgetting the NIRF allocates 20 points to outreach and inclusivity. So it mandates campuses to work towards a better outreach and inclusive ecosystem. Then we will talk about the struggles of transitioning to higher education institute. So whether there's a student with SLD or without an SLD, all of us have, struggled a little bit during the transition because the ecosystem sort of changes so much. So when we talk about students with SLD, they often struggle a lot when it comes to their on-campus life. Disclosing their disability and advocating for it is more than often a challenge because it leads to bullying, rejection, isolation, and stonewalling from the peers more than often. Then, as we spoke earlier, managing daily tasks independently because of timelines and making those plans is sort of difficult, and that is where they need a support system around them. Talking about academic life, coping in classroom, reading, writing, note taking, etc., is something that should be is it's a little challenging for them. Managing academic tasks like planning, timely submission, exams with deadlines, it is a difficult management situation when it comes to students with SLDs more than often. And then balancing their academic life and the pressure that the college life entails, it more than often the life on the campus and their academic life impacts their emotional well-being. There's a risk of low self-esteem and depression because they're not able to juggle between the tasks at hand. They're overwhelmed with managing the new environment around them, and there's a very high level of anxiety and risk of overstimulation because of the peer pressure and a lot of other pressure to perform better. So we're just going to see that in such a situation where that the struggles are real, how can this be perceived from a point of view of support?
Rohit was one of our early entrants into higher education. He has significant difficulties with reading and writing. The admissions committee at the college was worried whether he would be able to manage the multiple flight of stairs to his classroom. But in reality, he actually found it difficult to navigate new schedules, new systems, keeping up with his lectures, getting to his classroom on time, finding his classroom, making new friends. The list was endless. The first day he went to college, he went to the library to get his library cards, and he was pulled up for his illegible handwriting with the comment, "This is what happens when we have to fulfill quotas." Not surprisingly, Rohit struggled through the first term. He was quite miserable. He spent as little time as possible at college, and it was only regular, intensive counseling that kept him on track. His exams came along, the first term exams, and he had discovered that he'd been given extra time to finish his papers, but the seat in the hall had to be vacated because the next exam was scheduled immediately after. And he was describing this to his counselor. He says, "I felt like a worm. Everybody was standing in the corridor and discussing what to do with me." The principal came along and asked what was going on. And he took a different view. He pulled up the staff for not having made adequate arrangements. And he took Rohit with him. I'm going to describe this in his own words, which he told us about later. He said, "Ma'am, he took me to his own office He sat me down at his desk. He made space there for me. And he told me to finish my paper, take as long as I wanted. And he said, I'm sitting outside making phone calls. Don't worry, nobody's going to disturb you here. What a validation. This validation really changed his life at college. Suddenly, he was able to advocate for himself. He dived into campus activities, took part, joined some clubs. Ironically, in his last year at college, he took over a student newsletter as editor, and he made so many changes and made it so innovative that it won several awards.
And this is a beautiful instance where we see that how a validation from your direct environment, from your educators, can actually help you be able to exploit your actual potential without having to struggle and look back and be stonewalled as an individual with a specific learning disability. So it's very important for all of us to have that sort of validation, which actually is more than often the reason for making or breaking an individual in their formational years, which is more than often our time during our higher education. And now, what can we learn from our global leaders? So, if we have to look around us and we have to benchmark these institutions in our country, in different countries, just to understand that what are they doing to create this sort of inclusive environment. Talking about MIT, now a very interesting fact that dyslexia is so common in MIT that it's more than often called the MIT disease. MIT has a Disability and Access Services Office that works towards the inclusivity of students, faculty, and visitors with disability. They ensure equal access for students with disability while upholding the integrity of MIT's program and services. And how are they doing it? So, when it comes to counseling support, they're ensuring access to support, help managing conditions, and also tutoring. And then they're looking at advocacy for reasonable accommodations and working towards faculty capacity building. When it comes to academic support, they're looking at alternative exams, they're looking at extended timelines, readers, scribes, distraction reduced settings, clarification of exam questions. Material is also being provided in alternate format, which can be electronic and supported by note takers. When we move to assistive technology, there is so much of it right now. It's there in abundance. So they works towards consultation on assistive technology options, as not every tool is suitable for an individual with different sort of SLDs. So they sort of try to customize it and consult and help you understand which works the best for you. Demonstration of assistive technologies, assistance in making MIT's academic course material more accessible, and then they're developing into research. The McGovern Institute of Brain Research works towards brain imaging, cognitive neuroscience, computational neuroscience, genome engineering, neurotechnology, and also dyslexia and reading intervention, and the role of socioeconomic factors affecting the treatment of people with dyslexia. Moving to Yale's University, the Yale Center of Dyslexia and Creativity works towards accommodation, assistive technology, and research. Research resources are there, and they're also documenting success stories and advocating and working towards awareness. When we talk about success stories, it is very important for people to understand that with the right sort of accommodation and assistive technology, what is the success trajectory of an individual in such a setup. They're working towards counseling support which is provided and it's beyond the campus. There's on-campus support for students and for the faculty. And when it comes to accommodation, they're working towards accommodation around admissions, offering tailored support in terms of remediation, intervention based on specific needs of. Then academic support, curriculum adjustment, waiver of foreign languages, faculty sensitization, classroom lecture recording, exam accommodation, and again availability of tutors. When we talk about assistive technology, consultations on the technology options specific to your learning disability, Shewitz Dyslexia Screener, which helps the individual get screened and go for diagnosis. The note taking, speech to text, text to speech is again an assistive technologies that is doing wonder. YCDC has a strong research base which has studied intervention in dyslexia, conducted longitudinal study as well as neurobiological studies, and this is very imperative for us to create the best sort of support and assistive technology going ahead.
And I think what I've tried to do is inform the faculty of what dyslexia is. No matter how bright or accomplished or educated people have outmoded views of dyslexia. So to work with the faculty at conferences individually. And that's when you find out none of the faculty are dyslexic. And I think we are very, very fortunate that at Yale, that people who are in administration have been very, very supportive. For example, at our Yale Center, we, anybody that thinks they might have trouble learning or have dyslexia are referred. It's amazing what different stories they have and what different beliefs there are about dyslexia. So we try to speak with the faculty, have them understand, and what people were just saying. I mean, one of the things, for example, is learning a foreign language. We were seeing so many students that were working so hard, students who were dyslexic, on their foreign language requirement. And they weren't succeeding, and it was taking their time from courses they could succeed in. So very fortunately at Yale, I was able to work with people at the highest levels and suggest that maybe we can have a partial waiver of the foreign language requirement so that people could take a course in English, but based on helping you to understand the country, the culture.
Again, what we're trying to understand over here is that why students and individuals with SLD might struggle with a certain thing, a certain subject, a certain task. But having said that, we should always focus on making sure that if we are pushing them to do something, is that taking their time away from something at which they can actually excel? So, there's sort of that weightage that has to be kept in mind, and the waivers are to be designed accordingly that only help them be able to do and exploit the best of their potential. Then, moving to Stanford University, Office of Accessible Education and Schwab Learning Center, uh, they guide undergraduate and graduate students to become more efficient learners, nurture student staff community to integrate the goals. They streamline and advocate for accommodations for students with SLDs, offers consultation and personal learning, profile building for students, and learning coaches. When it comes to academic support, they focus on mediating between faculty and student just to make sure that the needs of the faculty are perceived well by the faculty, and whatever support the faculty is trying to provide is actually consumed by the student. And they further go ahead with modifying learning environments and policies regarding attendance, assignment, and exams. And they also look for faculty training in universal design learning. So moving ahead to assistive technologies that are being looked into by SLC, consultation on technology options makes assistive technology available for both student and faculty, and assignment, there these other tools that can be used, for example, calculators during for your assignments. Then going ahead, Stanford University conducts research programs such as reading and dyslexia research program. So having said that, again, the importance of research is very high because it is imperative to be able to keep on creating better options when it comes to inclusion and works toward better inclusion system. Then talking about Ashoka University, they have an Office of Learning Support that works towards the inclusion of students with SLDs in Ashoka University. The office works with individuals to arrange a case-by-case accommodation, streamline accommodations with faculty, and then also work towards the faculty training and coordination and remedial support for the students. They also offer students academic accommodation, accessible learning material, exam accommodation, and the bid support, exam support. When it comes to assistive technology, consultation on assistive technology option that matches your need the best. For example, speech to text, text to speech is something that they're looking into.
It is the key, basically. Being able to design a curriculum that is inclusive is that where we all kind of strive. And I guess that at a university, it can be quite difficult because it is really engaging a variety of academics, a variety of courses, and they all have different challenges. But for example, starting for exams can be really difficult for neurodiverse students, and the writing and the time pressure and so on. So even in changing the way that assessment is done and providing kind of a different way of assessing, not just one way, but so for example, allowing people to show what they know in different ways. And it could be by writing, it could be by presenting, it could be by debating, it could be, in by portfolio. Of course, it is dependent on the course, but just introducing a different way of assessment.
Again, this is very important for us to understand that when we are trying to conduct these assessments or give assignments, one of our prerogatives behind this is that we're trying to understand the learning that has been taken in by a student. And it will be wrong to say that if we want a students to be able to only showcase and express the learning in one format, it is more than often helpful with individuals and students with SLD to have that sort of option to be able to present and for us as educators to understand the learning outcomes through whatever was imparted in the classroom. Then key areas of interventions, if to say we can look into, starting with admissions. Admitting students with SLDs in PWD category should be focused on accommodation for entrance exams like scribes, compensatory time, preferential seating is something we can look into. College readiness and counseling should be available throughout the admission process for students. Admission personnel should be trained in the needs of students with specific learning disabilities. And then, yes, of course, looking into the scholarship. Then we come towards faculty and administration sensitization. It is very important to sensitize at all levels, be it the faculty, the administration, or the students. If even one of this particular part of the ecosystem or the constituent of the ecosystem is missed, our entire efforts towards sensitization might go towards redundance. Then we're talking about training faculty in UDL strategies for teaching and evaluating. Again, something that is imperative to making sure that whatever is being taught and whatever is being assessed and evaluated is applicable to students with all students, irrespective of their needs in a classroom. Facilitating inclusive pedagogy and managing inclusive classroom. Moving to classroom support, we should be allowing use of devices, for example, recorder, laptops, etc. In one of our previous webinars, we had this beautiful example of how if our child who's in a class, a student not able to read, or whatever is written on the board is not legible to the child, we generally sort of push them and support them to get their eyesight tested, to get reading glasses, and we never consider that as cheating or giving a tad bit of extra support. Then it's almost the similar, letting a person who finds it difficult to read, who finds it overstimulating in a classroom to take all instructions at once, be able to record, be able to use their laptops, to use assistive technologies and tools like speech to text, text to speech. Then there should be flexible and preferential seating, as we spoke about earlier, that how your environment can overstimulate you and that can get overwhelming. So, something as menial as preferential seating can help students with that. Making material available in accessible formats is again the key to make sure that whatever material is available is accessible to an individual with SLD. And then arranging and allowing note takers in the classroom. When we talk about curriculum, we should remember that whenever there is any flexibility that we are sort of trying to provide in the first choices of the subject, nowhere are we talking about compromising on the rigor. In modifying the assignments, as we just saw in the previous video, modifying the way of being able to give the assignment, it could be exams, essay, reports, presentation with lenient deadlines, and accommodation during exams. Again, we look into compensatory time, distraction-free seating, uh, and that might help our individual, our student with SLD to perform better. Then creating centers for support. And while we're trying to create these centers, what are we focusing at? Coordination, streamlining SLD accommodation across the university. So we are saying that we want the entire campus to have these accommodations, be it from a campus point of view, infrastructure point of view, or assistive technology point of view. Facilitate individualized accommodation licensing with faculty. We should be able to have that sort of one-to-one customized individual to individual basis technology for a faculty to understand that what sort of accommodation works better with what kind of SLD, working towards awareness and advocacy on SLD and learning diversity. Individual tutoring, supplementing academic support can again do wonders with students with SLD. Career and placement related support. So it's very important that through, there should be that sort of exposure, that sort of awareness, advocacy, success stories, where the students know that having that sort of learning disability also provides them with an extra edge, and how that can help them outperform students' life. We can always create a center to support that by ensuring inclusion, talking about awareness, sensitizing, and also helping them manage an independent living, and conducting these awareness and inclusion workshops for clubs and societies on campus, providing campus handbooks and resources in various accessible formats, and access to support groups, buddy system, and mental health services for our students to be able to manage better and be able to sort of create that balance between their academic and the personal life while being on campus. Technological support. There's a lot of support and technology that is available in abundance, so we need to make sure that they're accessible. The staff, the faculty is trained to be able to understand use that assistive technology as per the need. Mainstreaming usage in curriculum, making assistive tools a part of the curriculum. Workshops with faculty on assistive technology, just how to, be able to implement them, match it to the right kind of need, and how that can be an imperative part of teaching in a classroom. And technological assistance can also be provided and talked about in terms of time management and in, schedule management, as students with HLD often have issues being able to manage deadlines. And last but not the least, research. Advocating for centers of neurodiversity research and including neurodiverse scholars. So it's very important to have that sort of perspective, that sort of keen eye for people who are neurodiverse while we are advocating and creating these centers. accelerating research in assistive technology innovation on SLDs, and lobbying with organizations for their participation and the most important funding towards these research support centers.
The whole idea behind universal design is that it's important for every student. And here in the Academic Center for Excellence at Bryant, we also have our support services for our international students and English as a second language students. And as we discuss universal design with our faculty, we are finding that if we focus on just disability, it's harder for them because they see that as a small segment of the population. But if we focus on all students, and we also talk about our English as a second language students, that really show that universal design concepts can apply for them and can help them to learn more effectively in the classroom. So for example, even doing something like adding captions to your videos can help English, students who are studying the English language to know exactly what's happening in the classroom and to better access the material. Also, if we provide note-taking technology that students who may not be able to write quickly, whether they have learning disabilities or they aren't able to fluently write in English, are able to succeed. So it's really a matter of taking those universal design concepts and helping the faculty to know that it's not just students with disabilities. And university-wide, if we talk about this, it's much better than if it comes just out of my area, because they don't necessarily see that then as applying to the whole population.
So again, what we're trying to understand here is that when we're talking about inclusion, we're just not focusing on one thing, but we're sort of trying to create that ecosystem by using these universal design concepts like note-taking, closed captioning, where everything that is being imparted inside a classroom is accessible to all. The concept leads to a better learning outcome for every individual in a classroom. When inclusive classrooms are designed well, intervention for students with SLD help all students learn better. And that is what we're trying to focus on. That these concepts are not just going to make our material accessible to students with SLD, but work towards better learning outcomes of all students. And after this, if you want to quickly go back and just like think about where to begin with, we can start like sensitize the decision makers, the senior leadership, the faculty, the students, and make inclusion a common thought process. We can develop a very holistic inclusion strategy that addresses the student needs, the faculty capacity, the curriculum, and the accommodation around us. We can work consciously towards building that culture of inclusion and encourage admission and track success stories and cater to the PWD categories. And so the entire idea of having this discussion and walking through the entire presentation was that we don't want to miss the next genius that can be around us, like a Steve Jobs, Walt Disney, or an Elon Musk, who can just like invent the next invention can just like make our lives much easier. Having said that, thank you so much, everyone. I will now be handing this over to my colleague Bhavya to welcome our panelists for the day. Over to you, Bhavya.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Aprajita. Our panelists for the day are Mr. Devaditya and Ms. Suhana Bhutani. I will briefly give an introduction of the both of them. So, Mr. Devaditya co-founded Ottomans Institute with Paul D. Ottomans, which upskills underserved learners in more than 10 countries. It helped 30,000 just during the pandemic. He built the first AI virtual teacher humanoid for displaced and refugee learners in the world, currently upskilling refugees in UN camps. An avid innovator and technologist, he is currently also focusing on creating an AI-driven sign language teacher for deaf learners while also completing his PhD in AI and HCI. He was awarded by the UK Prime Minister in 2021 for his educational work, was named a Global Young Innovator by Innovate UK for work in AI, and was in Under 30 India by Mint Magazine. He is also a best-selling book writer, having published together an anthology from COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Devaditya. Um, our next panelist is Ms. Suhana Bhutani. Suhana has dyslexia and she's a young 19-year-old aspiring to be a doctor. She's in her first year of college in Lady Hardinge Medical College, New Delhi. She's a graduate of Step by Step World School. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Suhana. So, my first question to both of you would be, could you tell us a little bit about your journey with having an SLD? Yeah. Sorry, are you able to do it now? Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the warm introduction and absolute pleasure to be here. So diving straight to the point and the question you asked. So my journey with SLD is in two parts. One is my personal, I'll start with that, and secondly is my work. So from a personal front, I actually did not know I had an SLD. That's perhaps one of the things we should be talking about, because I did go to a very good school in India. It was a boarding school, but again, this was not something that was really looked at or tested to support students or to find out if they had any such issues. So from childhood, I did struggle with a lot of things, especially a lot of small fonts, mishmash, Excels. But this was only discovered when I went to the UK at university. And I wouldn't touch too much on it because in the previous presentation, I think a lot of that was already discussed on what could be done, from a university front to support learners who have some form of a SLD, how to discover it, what to support them with, etc. Now, my second part of my journey is my own work for people with SLD. I would put hearing impairment as one. So you've just talked about me trying to build an AI that provides real-time translation. I'm also looking at dyslexia and some other similar neurodiversities, dyspraxia, etc., through learning apps to support learners. And I believe that the tools are more or less out there. It needs to be fine-tuned more to the users, and it needs to become mainstream. And one of the very good things I heard in the last 5 minutes was about this universal model. And I think that's something that will really help push it forward, because till now we have been trying to build models and solutions around one, two, or a couple of SLDs. But if you have a universal model, then it can just be put out there where whoever needs whatever type of support can access it, and who doesn't, they can go as normal. So I think that's a very sort of good model that I have learned today as well, as a terminology. And I'll sort of stop here and go on with other points as the panel discussion continues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And that is one of our visions, to see the UDL being implemented. And like you said, AI assistive tech has to be mainstreamed. Moving on to you, Suhana. The question is, tell us a little bit about your journey with having an SLD.
Hi, thank you for having me. When I was diagnosed, my first assessment was when I was, I think, in my second grade, by the end of my second grade. So I got to know quite early in my life. And I was a part of a inclusive school, so they provided a lot of support and they taught me how to deal with the problem. Obviously, as I feel like problems initially in younger classes were more because I was struggling more and I didn't know what to do. I was in a space of hopelessness. But eventually, I got a hold of what to do, what not to do, and how what strategies make me learn better. And I think as the classes progressed, I became better. And I think college is a whole new story. We're still struggling first year of college, but I think we'll be fine.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, since you were diagnosed very early on, I feel like the early intervention is something that may have made a big difference in your journey ahead. My next
Yeah.
question to both of you is, why did you decide to pursue a technical degree when academics were such a struggle? So we could begin with Devaladya, and then we could move on to Suhana.
My background, my undergraduate was all actually in law. That anything I put my mind into, I can do it, and the limitations I have, I tend to find solutions around it, because I see myself as a problem solver. So that's why I've done it. However, there are challenges, but I don't see any of them as challenges. I either see them as opportunities. I'll explain that, and otherwise I see them as things that I need to go around. So one example of an opportunity is I'm a very slow reader. However, I'm very visual. So whenever I learn something, I can really picture it. And when I picture it, uh, sometimes, especially when it is into creative areas, I can really conceptualize things much faster. So that's an opportunity I have, and that really supports me. And when it comes to excels, etc., I know how to really find support as soon as possible to get me around that bump. Because end of the day, once I've gone through the problem, in terms of the intelligence aspect, etc., again, I would be, at least at par with others. It's just about getting around them, finding those solutions, and taking responsibility for finding those solutions. That has helped me to get where I am. And perhaps again, being in a university in the UK would have been supportive, because they've had a lot of these sort of centers and support for students, which I didn't get in school. And I'm sure a lot of that is really coming up in India, as I've seen with Ashoka University right now.
Thank you for sharing that. Suhana, what would be your take on that?
I don't think your struggles should decide what you want to do. But I obviously knew from the very beginning that what I wanted to do is very difficult, even for a child who doesn't have academic issues. But still wanted to do it, and I think there's a lot of visualization and understanding in my degree, so that is very beneficial for me, because I understand things easily. Obviously, we have to learn things to write on the paper, but it's okay. I mean, I manage through other strategies.
Thank you for sharing that, both of you. I see that visual learning or visualizing is a common thread for both of you, and as we have seen, that tends to be a trend. And Dev, you pointed out that you knew when to ask for support, and um, when struggling with something like that, that is one of the most important steps. My next question is to you, Suhana. So you are currently pursuing a medical degree. Tell us a little bit about what a day in your college looks like.
I have a very hectic schedule. So our college is like 6 days a week, from 8 to 4 every day, and you need 80% attendance. So it's very hectic, and the academics are also equally demanding. I think as years progress, they are more demanding, because we start going to the hospital. But I'm in my first year, so I that part of the I think is omitted. Um, but I think that's it. There's no much.
All right. My next question would be to you, Mr. Dev. You are currently in a significant and a very important decision-making role. So, does having an SLD hinder your ability to perform in any way? And And if not, how do you manage to balance your struggles with your strength?
I wouldn't say it hinders in any way. Perhaps it does, but I don't look at it in that manner. And it really boils down to what I said before, and that's perhaps whenever I have a shortcoming, I tend to be able to look for a solution or find support. For instance, building a team around it in my decision making area, and every time somebody's added to the team, it comes from an area which, that person will come in because they're better than me at doing that. So that's my strategy in doing it, because at the end we all have to reach the same place, and wherever there are any kind of bumps, be it because of my SLD or not, it's about finding somebody who can help us get over that bump. And similarly, in my own, let's say, my PhD journey as well, it's about finding somebody who can advise me to get over that bump. That's essentially my number one go-to in any kind of situation. Number one go-to in any kind of situation that I feel that I'm facing a little bit of difficulty.
Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that your perspective is to not see it as something that holds you back, and to instead find an ecosystem that helps leverage your strengths instead. My last question to both of you would be, what are 3 things you would advise students and faculty on inclusion of students with SLDs? So, Mr. Dev.
I think to start with faculty, they need to be sensitive. And a very recent incident, I'm talking about a professor who is probably, she's done MBBS, she's done MD. She's taking my Viva, and I'm sure she was very unaware of the fact that I'm dyslexic. But she made a very nasty comment that I don't talk like a person who has dyslexia, as if it was something which was bad. And I felt, more than I think me feeling sad that she made the comment, I was upset and upset at the fact that she was, she pursued a degree that I am doing, and she's more well educated than I am. Then why is she stigmatizing something which she probably teaches children in medical terms? So I think being sensitive and being aware for senior faculty is very important. And for students to vocalize their problems. I needed extra time for my final exams, and nobody had a clue in the college whether my university provides extra time to children with SLD or not. And I remember I wrote so many letters, and I went to the medical magistrate and I told them that I need it. I don't know, you make it possible, because DU provides extra time. So you see if your college can or not. And I am getting extra time. Hopefully, I have been told so. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. It is very important. It's surprising to see that somebody, like you said, is going to be teaching that. How do you impart something when that is your stance on dyslexia? So I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm also really glad that you fight for your rights and you've been vocal about the accommodations that you need, and they're being provided as well. Um, Moving on to you, what are your 3 tips on advising students and faculty?
I'll start with the students. I would say never see it as a limiting point if you can, because in certain aspects, it will give you more power, if you had to call it, or greater ability in doing certain other things that others can't. For instance, visualization for me. I came from a boarding school. My friend had polio in this day and age, and today he's a Paralympic high jumper, bronze medalist Olympics. So don't see it as a limitation. Of course, it's going to affect you in certain aspects, and try and find ways around it, and try and firstly find the strengths that it gives you, because whenever there is a limitation, there is a strength. So that's number one. Number two, from faculty and the general public, I think getting very rightfully said by Suhana as well, and I would say getting the buy-in or getting participation from the people who you want to support matters. And I'll give you one different example because this is the visual one, because I was also vice president of my university in the UK. And we spend millions on getting these ramps for people with disabilities, with wheelchairs, etc. And then we had a very good student who was in our council, and he was very vocal about it. So we then took the step of getting the vice chancellors, etc. involved, and the estates people came and they said, yeah, we've built it, what's the problem? And all he said was, he stood up with his crutch and said, sit in my wheelchair, try and climb that. They couldn't. It was a couple of degrees too steep. So get that buy-in from the people you want to support, because yes, there is best cases in the world, there is research, but end of the day, you want to get it from the people. And that ties into my third point. We are sort of, a combination of our environment. So if you're dyslexic, for instance, it doesn't mean one solution fits all. If you're dyslexic from a slum in Calcutta, if you're dyslexic from DU University, if you're dyslexic from a single parent, if you're dyslexic and dyspraxic, there are various combinations that you can have. And again, that ties into which group you want to first support, and get those solutions from them. And maybe you can actually create a best case. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that answer. I love the perspective of where there's a limitation, there's a strength. And also definitely having the stakeholders participate in the key decisions that are being made. And between the both of you, what you've covered are also some of the best global practices we've been seeing in universities that have been doing well on this front. So thank you so much for the discussion. I do hope it was enriching for us and also for the participants. With that, we'd like to close today's webinar. Thank you so much to all the attendees for joining, and to AICT for helping us with a great turnout for all 5 sessions. You can reach out to us with the information Aprajita had shared towards the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.